Blog Talk Radio.
Gentlemen, it seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations Team.
Welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On the line tonight, I have me, Jeremy, also. If you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick.
Hi, it's me, Nick, Mothman Warrior 1.0.
And Brent, the Archangel.
And tonight's show is going to be a good one. It's on the Ely UFO Crash, which I personally am the expert on this case, I guess, out of everybody. But before we get into the case, I'll say, Nick, would you like to go over a couple news stories that you have?
Sure, I got a handful of news stories I can go through really quickly. First off, to begin the show, I start off with a story about a Russian meteor that hit Russia last week that caused some injuries and a great disturbance in the international community. Apparently, a race for cosmic souvenirs has begun after scientists said there are still many pieces of the meteorite that fell to Earth near the Russian city of Chelyabinsk last week waiting to be found. The extraterrestrial origin of 53 rock fragments collected on the frozen surface of Lake Chebarkul was confirmed during analysis conducted by the Urals Federal University in the early hours of Monday. But this is just the start of the process of gathering the debris left by the large meteorite. An expert said it is a stone meteorite that belongs to a class of ordinary chondrite meteorites, likely to be named Chebarkul after the lake where the fragments were found. The meteorite is the biggest such object that hit the Earth in more than 100 years. Within the academic community, there appeared to be difference of opinion on Monday as to the exact nature of the object, whom some experts said it was conceivable that it was a comet that had struck northern Russia at 9:20 a.m. on Friday. The same expert named Glahovsky said it was mainly made up of massive ice of which no trace was left. The meteorite was very similar, they said, to the meteorite that struck Siberia in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of like you said that there's kind of like a cosmic race in a sense to try to get pieces of the asteroid or meteor, whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, apparently the meteor went over Russia and it exploded, and there's very little debris left. However, scientists are trying to pick up whatever fragments they can.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are speculating that. Oh.
Oh, and I don't think Brent's paying attention. Anyways, what were you saying, Nick?
There's some people out on the fringe. I don't know if I want to call them the fringe because I think we're part of the fringe, but there's some people out there saying that it perhaps was a UFO, an alien spacecraft, and there's a cover-up by the Russian government, et cetera, but I really don't see any evidence as of yet to prove that theory.
Mm-hmm. That's weird. I know. How many pieces of that meteor are around still? I mean, didn't they pick up the bulk of whatever hit?
Yeah, it said 53 pieces have been picked up so far, and I guess they're still looking.
Yeah, what do you think, Brent?
Of what, the meteor?
What Nick said is like a race to pick up pieces of the meteor and sell them?
I guess. I mean, I don't know what no one knows what the material is made out of yet, or do they?
Well, meteors in general are worth a lot of money to collectors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have one news. What's that, Brent?
No, I was going to say that's kind of strange how people just scramble to pick up stuff like that.
Well, I have one news story I was going to say really quick for Nick says the rest of his. A joint expedition between the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, the New Zealand Ocean Research Company, and the University of Aberdeen in Scotland set out on the RV Kahora to survey the seafloor of the southwestern Pacific. The boat traveled to the Kermadec Islands, located halfway between New Zealand's North Island and the country of Tonga. The islands are located near the Kermadec Trench, which plunges over 36,900 feet below the ocean surface and one of the deepest points on Earth. Surveying life so far beneath the surface is no easy task. In this expedition, scientists used a combination of baited fish traps and cameras that they let fall to the ocean floor. Over 7 days, the scientists collected over 100 specimens and took more than 6,500 photos. Besides the eel pout, which is a long eel-like fish that frequently lives on the bottom of the ocean, the researchers also found fish that hadn't been known to live in the areas of that Pacific, as well as fish that haven't been seen for more than a century. For instance, first caught off New Zealand in shores in 1870s, a cosmopolitan rat tail has been spotted at the number of deep ocean sites around the world. The researchers hadn't seen it in New Zealand since its initial discovery. That's pretty cool. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discovery. I just think more information needs to be found out about it so we can learn more.
Mm-hmm. Well, supposedly we don't know that much about our deep oceans, they were saying, but I guess that we're going after more often over the last couple of years. I know. Just as far as what we've reported on our show, there's been a couple of expeditions.
Yeah, they do say that the last frontier on Earth is the oceans themselves, because I believe the deepest part on the planet under the ocean is the Marianas Trench, I believe. And I think it's so far deep that even our most technologically advanced submersibles cannot survive under the water pressure. So there's still a lot of exploring left to do, a lot of animals to be found, and who else knows what lies beneath the waters that deep.
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Exactly.
Yeah, Nick, you had other news articles?
Yeah. Okay. I have another article about another apocalyptic theory out there about the demise of the universe. A concept known as vacuum instability could result billions of years from now in a new universe opening up and the present one replacing it. It all depends on some precise numbers related to the Higgs-Boson particle that researchers are currently trying to pin down. A Higgs-like particle was first seen at the Large Hadron Collider last year, associated with an energy field that pervades all space. Basically what they're saying is that in the future there will be a quantum fluctuation that makes a tiny bubble of the vacuum that a universe really wants to be in, and basically what, I'll put it into English because the physics language is a little weird, but basically what they're saying is that there's going to be a new universe that will replace this universe at the end of its current existence. It's been known now for some time that the universe expands, and one theory out there talking about the Big Bang is that our universe wasn't the first universe, and that there was a universe that existed prior to ours, and perhaps an infinite number of universes that expanded to a certain point, and then when they hit their border, I guess you could say, when they got as big as they could get, a new Big Bang happened, and a new universe was born, until that universe expanded as far as it could go, and no one really knows. Even this God particle, they call it, really hasn't been discovered. I remember last year they did an experiment, and they finally thought they had found something, but they really didn't find anything at all. So, and then even the scientists in this article said, if this apocalyptic scenario was to happen, it's not going to happen for hundreds of billions of years. So, yeah, it's not even conceivable for, we might not even be around as a species around then. So to make predictions that far off into the future is mental pleasuring oneself at its best.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know I was on. Okay. Yeah, I was just wanting to say something about that. How do you know, I mean, you're talking about more than one universe. How do you know that there's more than one universe? What exactly, I mean, how big is a universe supposedly supposed to get? Because we know the universe isn't it pretty much infinite? What is the boundaries between one universe and another one?
Well, the thing is, no one really knows. Here's here's the dirty, dark secret of physics today. A lot of the scientists really don't know what they're talking about.
I believe that.
I read just for instance, I read Stephen Hawking's latest book, or one of his latest books. I'm not sure if it's his latest, but in it he says that there's this self-existent universe-making bubble that universes just kind of float out of and spontaneously exist. It's really trippy. I mean, stuff like that's passing off as science. Actually, Stephen Hawking's idea sounds a lot like Plato or something, but there's stuff passing off to science today that is more nonsensical than religion. It just makes no sense. That's all I could really say about it.
So what's your other stories, Nick?
Let me see. Let me get them. There's another story I have about some asteroid slime. Apparently, a weird green slime, which is said in folklore to appear at the same time as meteors hit Earth, has been found in a bird-like park in Somerset. The RSBP, or I guess that is a scientific abbreviation for the slime, has appeared for, that's an organization, has appeared for help in identifying the slime, which is said to be scattered on grass banks close to pools and lakes around Ham Wall Nature Reserve near Glastonbury. The jelly-like substance could be bacteria, fungus, or toad innards. Some believe it could be a substance that has been written about for centuries called star or astral jelly, which supposed to appear in the wake of meteor showers. Its appearance has coincided with a meteor strike in Russia and the harmless flyby of an asteroid at a record distance from Earth last week. Stephen Hughes said, "The past week we've been finding piles of this translucent jelly dotted around the reserve. It is always on grass banks away from the water's edge. They are usually about 10 centimeters in diameter. Experts really don't know what it is yet. And there are records dating back to the 14th century which call it star jelly. One of the more favored explanations that it is a form of cyanobacterial called nostoc. Others suggest that it is the remains of regurgitated innards of amphibians, such as frogs and toads, and their spawn. Alternatively, it may be related to the intriguingly named crystal brain fungus." And basically, to summarize the rest of the article, they're trying to find out what this stuff is, and no one really seems to know what it is at this minute.
Well, I know that we had a radio show like a year or two ago where we had a similar article on it. I think it's kind of weird that it's like the simplest things like that. Well, I guess not really simple, but something like that. There's even hard evidence to show that it exists. We still don't know what it is. That's weird.
Yeah.
Wait, did you say the slime was supposed to be from space, or it's from amphibians here on Earth? What? Or they just don't know?
They don't know. That's the thing. They think it's either a type of bacteria, a type of algae, a type of fungus. It could be the innards of amphibians. It could be mold. No one seems to really know the answer, at least according to the article.
You're saying that some people thought it was coming from a meteor, possibly?
Yes, that's what legends and myths coming from medieval Europe seem to indicate, that this fungus appears whenever a meteor shower happens. Why? Exactly. What it is, we don't know. What it has to do with meteor showers, we don't know. Maybe it's a type of fungus that only grows because the magnetic field of the Earth becomes a certain way after a meteor shower. That's my best guess.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think it is, Brent?
I don't know. It's kind of strange. I've never really heard of that before. That's pretty new to me.
It's like the blob or something.
I was going to say,
it's quite an interesting phenomena.
Well, the consistency of it is almost like that slime you see in like silly putty or something. Right, Nick?
Yeah. It says it's more like a goo. I mean, the article is very ambiguous and doesn't really give too much specific information.
Well, I'd say, Nick, do you have any more news articles?
No, I'm out of articles now.
All right, well, I'm going to get started with tonight's topic. Tonight's topic, like I said earlier, is the Ely UFO Crash from Ely, Nevada. Before I get deep into this, I got to say a little bit of history about what's going on. Otherwise, people won't really know what I'm talking about. Well, how did I first hear about this crash? I have like an outline here. Well, I first heard about it. We were doing a radio show a couple years ago, actually several years ago now, like in 2007, 2008, and we were approached by a listener who told me, hey, there's some kind of a UFO crash in Nevada. Have you heard about this? And I said, no, as any good investigator would say. So I looked up this UFO crash and found the Ely listing. And it turned out to now it's on, since 2008 for, 5 years now. I've gone all around the state and on different trips to different universities, talking to different people, looking for evidence and eyewitness stories. Nick's been on there on most of them with me. It says, how did I hear about it? I guess I just went over that, sorry. What evidence have I gathered? I have dozens and dozens of witnesses, first, second, and third hand, and I think I even have a fourth hand story. Like I said, I've gone to different universities. I have gotten at least, Nick, like 10 or 15 good newspaper articles.
Yeah.
We've gone out and actually found a couple of different sites that probably at least one of these sites is the crash site. And I guess one of the things that kicked me off looking for evidence for the case, I don't know if you guys are familiar with George Knapp. He's kind of a popular paranormal, UFO-related figure. Well, I actually wrote this guy talking about the case when I first found out about it, and George Knapp told me, well, look, there is no such thing as first-hand witnesses for this case. There's no definite evidence. Don't waste your time. You're not going to find anything. So George Knapp, giving me his little speech, I guess you'd call it. So that got me started with the whole case in general, pretty much. That gave me some of my drive. Boy, that really makes my blood boil when you hear that type of thing about something that you really care about and you're working on, you know.
Mhm.
Well, Nick.
Yeah.
So before we get deep into it, can you and Brent talk a little bit about where you heard about the crash, or was it from me? I'm not sure.
Well, I can give a brief overview of what I know. Apparently, sometime in the 1950s.
I know. I mean, not an overview of what happened. I mean, like how you found out about it.
Yeah. Well, most of it I found out from you. I have read some different websites online, and I've gone through the newspapers with you, and then I've seen the infamous YouTube video, talked to witnesses with you, etc.
What about you, Brent?
Well, for me, as far as I know, I've heard it from you, and that's pretty much all I know about it is what you know.
Well, now that we kind of got the little basics of how we found out about it out of the way, well, here's what appears on the internet. You see a listing: 16 alien bodies recovered, anywhere from August 12th to 14th, 1952, Ely, Nevada is what it says. So, in my notes, it shows 16 bodies to be the highest number of alien bodies ever retrieved from any UFO crash so far that we know of. The second would have to be Aztec, New Mexico, with 12 bodies, and a UFO crash from southwestern Ohio with 11. The crash date was 1952, which would put it smack dab in the year of the saucer, as Project Blue Book would call it. The year of the saucer. Nick, would you like to talk a little bit about that? Maybe his phone cut out. Yeah, Nick got kicked off. Anyway, so the year of the saucer, what this was in 1952, Project Blue Book that had the most reports out of any single year in Project Blue Book. But in case you wonder what Project Blue Book is the government's explanation for UFOs at that point in time. And they were collecting reports and having a study on what people were seeing and what was reported to them and all that sort of thing. I guess it was ended sometime in the 60s, and they claimed this Ely UFO incident wasn't listed in Project Blue Book, which is odd. The only things that aren't listed in Project Blue Book are really rare, big incidents, kind of like Roswell wasn't really reported in there. I could know the Kingman UFO crash wasn't reported in there. I don't know. Can you think of any other important ones that aren't in there, Brent?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, anyways, back on here. Well, Ely, one thing you have to remember before I get deep into this is Ely was a remote and private community at this time. It wasn't really, I mean, even nowadays, it's not a big happening place. I mean, this was a small town America, 1950s, like, you know. Figure Eisenhower was president, the Korean War was still going on. This 1952, anywhere between 52, 53. The United States was starting to get back on its feet. The area, it's popular even now for railroads, and mining was booming at this time. Casinos were getting back in business post-World War II. Tourism wasn't very popular in northern Nevada at that point in time, and it really isn't at this point. Everyone would rather go to Vegas, you figure. So I'm going through this pretty quick, trying to get all the basics out of here real quick. I wrote, describe what Ely and Ruth look like today. Well, Ruth, you got to imagine, it's kind of like a half-desert, half-pine forest type environment. There's not like giant redwood trees, not that type of thing, but it snows and it's cold most of the year. It's not uncommon to be in the negatives. Like, I guess last week it was negative 24 there, I heard from some people I talked to. And Ely and Elko are the two major cities up in that area. It's a bunch of small town, really tiny, small, sparse towns up there. 2-lane highways. I mean, try to set the scene here. Picture Las Vegas in the 1930s. That wouldn't be too far off. Most of the buildings, the ways of life, and scenery haven't really changed like you would imagine it would since the 1950s in that area. So anyways, now that I got all that out of the way, I guess the story starts in 1952. There is some kind of an object crashed near or in this mining pit called Copper Flats, which is that's not in Ely, it's next to Ely. And the story goes that this UFO crashed in this mining pit, or next to this mining pit, and all sorts of military police and government officials, men in black, were all combing this area for years. Years, yes, not months, years. So, to get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about that mine. Well, the mine, it's an open pit mine, which means it's dug down into the earth. It's not like a hole in the mountain, sort of like it's not like a coal mine or nothing like that, but it's been bought and sold a number of times during the year, and the Yugoslavian company bought it now, and they're pretty secretive on what goes on in there. If you're not an employee or if you're from the general public, I guess they have a don't ask, don't need to know type of attitude. They owned the biggest railroad in northern Nevada at the time, which was the Nevada Northern Railroad. It brought supplies in and out of the mine at this point in time, in the 50s we're talking about, and it carried children to school and carried people in and out of that remote part of the state. You got to imagine, like I said, this is the 1950s, sparsely populated even for nowadays. And I have tried to contact this mining company now for 5 years, and I've never got a phone call, never got called back. I don't know. Maybe they're just really busy. Who knows? You know what I mean? It's like, I tried both approaches. I tried telling them I'm a researcher, this is what I'm doing, come contact me, heard nothing. Then I tried to say, hey, I'm a tourist, do you have any questions? Sorry, I got a question. Anyways, have a couple questions. Can you answer some questions for me? Still nothing. Well, I have a couple of popular stories here related to the crash. Well, the most popular story, I guess this was done by a TV station out of Reno, Nevada, and they interviewed a couple of witnesses, and this is the video you see frequently on the internet. Well, there's a security guard who worked for that mine I was telling you about earlier, and he's seen this UFO crash or seen it fly over right before it crashed. That's the popular story. The story was given by a third-hand witness, which means it's not the person that told the story. It's almost as if the person told the story to someone else and that person told that person. So this is a third-hand story. I'll get into that in a little bit, because that kind of makes things difficult in a way. There's somebody named Claude House. He's living in East Ely at this time. Apparently he was supposed to be he was a kid at the time, and he lived on the opposite side of town from where the security guard seen the UFO crash. Sorry, I got mixed up there for a second. Well, the town of Ruth I was telling you about is right next to the copper mine. I'm trying to picture this. You picture this in your mind. On the far left is Ely. Then comes a little town named Ruth, and the copper mine is next to Ruth. Well, the town of Ruth is on the eastern side of Ely, or western side of Ely. Sorry about that. I'm getting mixed up here. Well, on the opposite side of Ely, this was a kid, and he said that the county sheriff, or the town sheriff at that time, was sitting in the front yard and watched this craft fly overhead. And I guess Claude said he recalled a few local roads being closed off for quarantine to the general public shortly after. And a small plane had crashed outside of town. Well, if a small plane had crashed outside of town, I don't think that they would be quarantining the area off for months or years afterwards. It makes no sense. What do you think, Brent? Well, anyways, there's a book called Weird Nevada. It's written by Joe Osterly and Tim Crinland. Well, I talked to them, and they told me a story about a woman was having a dinner party, and she seen it crash, and apparently they went out there and looked at it, and they left real quick before the military got there, and I'll get into that real quick in a minute, too. The original investigator, he came in the 1970s and was talking to witnesses and different people that lived in the area. I keep in touch with him. I talk to him, I don't know, on a fairly frequent basis, at least once every few months. And he told me stories about military police for the area for weeks and interrogating people. And he told me the area that they had their exact, I don't know what you call it, a camp setup. And apparently he said that they have some relics and things from camp, or if I go out there I'll find some, I don't know, something like that. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of stories out there. I'm trying to think. There's an Indian reservation called Duckwater out there. That's where most of the reports originally came from. Of course, they don't really like to talk to outsiders nowadays. Kind of, I don't know, even for nowadays, the town at Ely, being from Las Vegas, if people don't know, I go to Ely on a fairly frequent basis, and a lot of these people won't really talk to me because I'm not from there. Kind of have to, I guess like anybody, you have to gain their trust and show them, okay, I'm not a wacko, I'm not a quack. I am interested in this, so you need to talk to me type of thing. But
yeah,
you got to imagine, TV crews go in and out of there all the time. And you got to say, okay, well, how do I know this guy's not just going to be another random TV personality taping me and running out, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to get more into the specific sightings later on. I'm just trying to go quick over the general popular belief, and then I'm going to get into what I know and all that. Oh. Well, there's something called Project High Range. Project High Range was a top-secret government project started in the late 1950s to track and monitor the X-15 rocket plane. The X-15 rocket plane is almost has a stealth bomber, stealth fighter look to it, and it could fly into the lower atmosphere during a regular flight and land on a runway like a regular aircraft. And apparently they thought that this would be good for warfare of some sort or for scientific research. From the best of my knowledge, only 2 of these planes have crashed. And one of them is in a place called Mud Flats, which is in Nevada, and the other one is in California. One of these pilots is still alive, and I talked to the family of the man, and they said that no, it didn't crash near Ruth or didn't crash near Ely, which is what a lot of people say the crash was, so go figure, right? And doing my own research, apparently there is these facilities located near Beatty, Nevada, which is down near Vegas, Edwards Air Force Base, which is out in Palmdale, and most importantly, the installation is located on Kimberly Mountain, overlooking Copper Flats and Ely and Ruth. Wow. So during this time, this was 5 years after the UFO supposedly crashed, all this started going on with the rocket plane and all that. Sounds good. You know, top secret airplanes being created, they're monitoring these airplanes. Well, until you start researching the project, this gets really strange. Apparently, the U.S. military and NASA both operated this project until at least the 1970s. I interviewed employees who stated that the government didn't only track the X-15 spy plane, but did track flying saucers, at least from that one installation. And who knows how many other installations there were. That's only the 3 that I found out about. So there could be 10 or 20 of these things. Who knows? Well, I guess the military thought that the locations where these flying saucers would crash, they would start putting these radar installations in these areas. I noticed through multiple interviews with different eyewitnesses and different enthusiasts and traveling around the country that radar towers are almost always installed near or at past UFO crash sites within a reasonable amount of time. And when I say reasonable amount of time, I mean between about 5 years. I wrote, why? Well, we talked to a number of people that work for the government, work for different businesses and things. They said the government thinks that other UFO activity will take place at these old crash sites. And that's not an incorrect statement. There's something called Flatwoods, West Virginia. The government located a tracking station nearby. And ironically, supposedly a UFO crashed in Flatwoods, and a creature was seen in the area. But anyways, without getting too off topic, apparently a few days later, the military people were saying there was other UFOs flying around the area, landing and taking off. So you figure that would be a good hotspot to put a radar tower in, I guess, to track UFOs. And there's one in Kingman, Arizona, where a UFO apparently grazed the top of a mountain and crashed. But what's weird about this is another UFO came a few days later. I know this sounds crazy, I know, but another UFO came a few days later, and apparently I don't know if it was searching for the other UFO or what happened, but we had a guest on a radio show that's an author was telling us all about this. You remember, Brent, when we had Harry Drew on the show?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, well, anyways, so you figure Project High Range had its facility on top of Kimberly Mountain within 5 years of this Ely UFO crash, and this radar tower's location is overlooking that copper mine that a lot of people say the UFO crashed into, and it's overlooking Ely. So I think that is the case. This radar tower, the X-15 spy plane, of course that was top secret at the time, but I think that's kind of the cover-up story they use nowadays for what they were really doing up there. If you find that's not weird enough, or if you don't believe me, I got more to the story. I think it was October. In October, me, our other investigators, Nick and Tim, we went up there because Brent wasn't able to make it at that point because of work. But, yeah, anyway, so we went up on top of this mountain where this radar station was once standing. It's probably about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes out of Ely, you'll run into this road that'll lead up there. But anyway, so we go up on this dirt road. It's probably about an hour, 30 minutes or so on this dirt road. It's very dangerous, by the way. I don't recommend anyone go up there. So we go up this road, and immediately about, I don't know, a couple miles down the road, there's this sign from the 1950s when the base was built. It says, trespassers can be shot. This is a government facility, yada, yada, yada. And you can see the remnants of a guard station were there. And if anybody that's listening, if you've seen the pictures of Area 51, you know what I'm talking about, those red signs.
That's what it made me think of. Oh, God.
That's exactly what it was, but it was kind of like an earlier version of that. And on the way up this mountain, you could see that there's several different checkpoints where chain link fences used to be, or different sorts of security. Anyways, before we went up there, we were told that there's some modern-day cell phone towers up there and communication devices. But when we got up there, there was also some military mobile trailer-looking things, and there was a few military buildings mixed in with these. I guess they were cell phone towers. Most of the original equipment was gone. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing in those trailers, but if you're sitting up there, because there's no noise at all, or no background noise, there's a low hum of like electrical equipment and things coming out of these trailers. I don't know if they're tracking weather. I don't know if they're still trying to track UFOs, airplanes, whatever. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting to note. Again, I don't recommend that anybody try to go up there or go out of their way to find this place because it's very dangerous. There's really no sort of emergency services. If you do break down up there, you're walking the couple hours, maybe even days back to Ely down this mountain with loose rocks and all that. I know Brent hasn't been there, but even he was like, dang, that sounds like a pretty dangerous drive.
Yeah.
Well, are you planning to go back?
Well, we go back and forth to Ely all the time. We're going back in 2 weeks, early March.
But to that specific area, would you go back to it? You keep saying it's so dangerous, but would you personally go back to it?
I've been there once. I wouldn't go back there again unless I had to for some reason because there's really not much to see up there. There's a few government trailers, like I said, they're like camouflaged green. They look like they were pulled by a truck at one point. And there's not really too much to see. Most of the original buildings are gone, but, I mean, it would be a cool trip. But it's too dangerous just to go out there just to see what's up there. It's not really worth the time. Well, for me, because I'm doing this UFO crash case, and that was important to me to have to go up there at least once to see what's still up there. But just a small portion of the case. I'll talk a little bit about some evidence we have. Well, there's a few weird rock samples we've been given, which are from the copper mine area. Well, sorry, I know I keep going back and forth here. The copper mine, I have to tell our listeners, it's cut off to the public. The company doesn't let random people go in and out unless they're an employee or you have some kind of business going in and out of there. There was a town called Ripetown, and there was a town called Kimberly that were located where the mining pit is now around that area, and they bulldozed the towns and made it mine property. Well, there was a resident that was allowed, she's a historian, she was allowed to go in there and collect samples of rocks and different things from where Ripetown and these things used to be. And we got several different weird, sorry, that makes sense. We got several stories about what they found in them. Close to where one of the towns were, we had got a rock sample from a resident from an area of interest, is what I call it. The rock sample we were given appears to be a darker brown in color, highly magnetic, and is pretty heavy for its size. It's about 1 inch tall and 2 inches across or so. It's allegedly found and rumored by one of the UFO crash sites, which is close to this mine. And I'm not saying this is definitely a piece of UFO-related material or case-related, but it's strange, you have to admit. We've showed it to several different geologists, and none of them really know what the thing is. The closest thing they say is it's like iron ore, but can't really put your finger on it. But you also
are they not able to test it? Are they not able to test it somehow and find out what it is?
Yeah. Sorry, Tim just called in. Tim?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah, anyway, so...
yeah, I'm listening.
Well, yeah, so, anyways, we had got this rock tested by several different people, and we don't know what it is.
Okay.
We were told that it might be a piece of a meteor of some sort, which is still pretty cool to have, I guess. But
yeah,
whatever it is,
but
where? What?
Go ahead, Jim. No, go ahead.
Where this? Are you talking to me, Tim?
I said go ahead.
Well, where this rock was found, we were told there's big piles of dirt that don't match the natural dirt in that area. Mining records show that the mine did not mine in this area, and they have records of all this stuff. So where did the dirt come from, and why is it there? We don't know. A possible theory is that maybe mining officials used it to cover up the impact crater, the impact zone of this UFO crash. Because if you look at the Aztec, New Mexico incident, the military did take dirt and they tried burying They tried burying this impact crater, try to hide it from all the civilians and local people from finding it. Well, there's a man named Art Campbell that I'm good friends with that we talked to a few times on our show. He actually went out there doing the same sort of thing I'm doing, and they actually seen that there was remnants of military in the area, as in like old shells, car parts, different things were all on top of this soft dirt. To make a long story short, this might be the same sort of case. I don't know. Well, there's another rock sample that was found somewhat nearby. I was shown this rock sample by two different people in the community, two different samples from two different people, and they don't know that each other has that rock sample. Well, this sample is lightweight, yellow-colored, and has the consistency of a dried-out honeycomb with a molten, almost like it was molten at one point, or just very hot. I don't know. It almost looks like melted sandstone or something, but
yeah, it's very weird.
What's weird about these rocks is one of the samples we were given was morphed. That's the only word I could use. It was morphed or stuck to the outside of a piece of wood, like from the original settlement of Ripetown or Kimberly, one of the two. And this yellow substance, I don't know, it's almost as if maybe somebody threw it. It's almost like it splashed in a sense, or was thrown against a rock or a piece of wood that would stick to it at one point in time. I don't know. I also know a local museum up there has one of them on display, but you have to ask for it. They won't show you unless you ask.
Yeah, it's one of the more bizarre things I've seen. And even Nick, what was your theory on that?
The rock was pretty weird. It looks like it's gone through some very drastic or dramatic metamorphic processes by being scrutinized to heavy amounts of pressure and heat, which has caused the sandstone to fold in on itself. And, well, actually, during the process, it folds in on itself, and it basically becomes liquid, like molten lava. And if I'm right, I think the yellow rock that Mary gave to us would probably be a rock that was cooled slowly, because I believe when it cools fast, it becomes very dark and very powder-like the rock you would see on the beaches of Hawaii from the volcanoes. And the more slower speed rock looks like the rock that we have, or the honeycomb rock.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's weird is that we call it the honeycomb rock. If you tap it on a table, it's hollow inside. Like, almost as if it's, like I said, like a honeycomb or something. Like, it's very lightweight, too, because this sample was like the size of, I don't know, like, as long as a pencil and about as wide as your hand, and it almost felt like it had no weight to it. But that one isn't magnetic, like the rock that we were actually allowed to take home with us. That one is more heavy and more, I don't know, call it more like what you would be thinking with the average rock.
Yeah, we got pictures of it, Joe, we could put online.
Yeah, we do. We were going to probably put it up on our website.
Actually, they might even be on there already. I haven't been on it in a while. I haven't checked, but I'll go check after the show.
All right, well, me and Nick have been going to different universities around our area looking at old newspapers on microfilm since 2008. So we looked at the Ely Daily Times, the Ely Record, the Eureka Sentinel, the Review Journal, the Reno Gazette, the Eureka Miner? Anyways, there's 7 or 8 of them total. We looked all the way from 1935 to 1960 searching for articles on this UFO crash. So far, we have not found an article stating in black and white, UFO crashes in Ely. But he has found other strange things. For instance, there's an unexplained object being sighted all around the state for that specific period in time. It's reported as far south as Tonopah and as far west as the town of Fallon. The object was said to have smashed into a light pole in or near Ely and was last seen flying near Ruth, which, like I said, is right outside of Ely where that UFO was said to crash. The object reportedly had all of the power in the individual's homes and streetlights shutting off as it flew overhead. This is all reported in different newspapers. I have it saved to flash drives and copies of it from the microfilm. I was going to ask you guys, like Brent, Tim, and Nick, and Becky, do you know of anything that would shut off the power in people's homes as it flew over?
I don't.
No.
I've heard of UFOs doing that, but I don't think I know anything man-made that does that. But I mean, I don't have that much knowledge of aircraft, anyways. But I think I have heard stories of UFOs doing that. I mean, you've seen stuff. Of course, there's been movies and stuff where a UFO will like fly over someone driving in their car, and the car will like shut down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've heard stories about the power in your house going off too.
Well, what about you, Brent? Do you know of anything that's man-made, at least, that would do with it? Especially in the 1950s, you got to imagine?
No, not really in the 1950s. In the 1950s, anything that was in the air is really nothing that, like even nowadays, we don't have like flying EMPs or anything like that could really do that, besides bombs and stuff like that. Other than that, we can't really do that yet.
Well, you have to imagine also, at this time they had primitive helicopters. I guess you'd call them primitive compared to Vietnam standards of 20 years later.
Just to maybe play skeptic's advocate, I'd like to maybe suggest maybe it was an arc blast that knocked out the power of the house. Maybe this is the giant arc blast that came from wherever the power supply is in Ely at the time, and it knocked out all the lights. And maybe it could have been a solar flare too. Tim just threw out there to me. That might be highly doubtful, but just play skeptic's advocate.
But solar flares and arc blasts don't travel from Tonopah to the far corner of the state and back across, though.
Yeah, no, it does sound very absurd to me, but I was just going to throw that out there for people who might want the quote-unquote rational explanation for it.
But whatever was shutting the power...
Give them a little piece of the bone, too. I said you got to give them a little piece of the bone, too.
Well, you have to imagine, whatever this was highly magnetic to shut the power off as it's going over. So I wrote, it was not a meteor because it increased and decreased its speed and at one point even stopped. And meteors don't turn, they don't stop. I don't know how you would see if they increase or decrease their speed, but 2 of the 3 can be debunked. And anyway, so that's one of the news articles we found. Another one says, literally, within weeks of the UFO crash, the newspaper wrote an article saying that some hoaxers, as it said, brought an alien into a local police station 2 weeks earlier, which would put it almost at exactly the crash date that we have in mind. And this alien, they said, was some sort of a chimp that was shaved or something. Anyways, if you look deep into it, this might actually be a rational explanation, as the government puts it, for what had happened with the UFO crash. I mean, why would they have to go out of their way to explain them bringing a chimp, or an alien in that case, into a police station if it was no big deal?
Wait,
well,
what?
Nick had found... Okay, well, I'll start over.
Well, I just understand. How does that explain the 16 bodies, a chimp in a police station? How does that explain the crash and the 16 bodies that were supposedly seen?
No, I'm getting there. I was saying there's no article that says specifically this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. But within 2 weeks within this crash, there was an article in the paper that said someone had brought some chimpanzees that were shaved into a police station and said they were aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that people believed that aliens were brought to this police station 2 weeks before. Well, it just so happens that's when the UFO crashed. So that might be the government trying to explain what had happened. Maybe they really were brought into the police station. like I said, I know we talked to a man named Harry Drew, and he said that the UFOs, or not the UFOs, the aliens from his case were brought to a police station until the military picked them up. And like I said, this is a very small town at the time. I think only 6,000 people live there now. So possibly someone picked these beings up and brought them inside the police station. I don't know. I'm not saying that's definitely what happened.
Were they trying to say that the shaved chimps is what people saw at the crash site, the 16 alien bodies? Is that what they're trying to say, that those were shaved chimps?
Well, yeah. What they're trying to say is the government was saying that, because I guess the rumor was that the aliens were brought to the police station, but what they're saying is that that was the rational explanation for what people were seeing was shaved chimps.
Okay.
It happens all the time, though.
Yeah, that always happens. They bring shaved chimps to police stations, and the people think they're aliens. People are that dumb.
Especially here in the Southwest and Nevada, that happens all the time.
Yeah, there's chimps being brought all the time into Ely.
That is a new one. I've never heard the shaved chimp theory. So.
I know Becky researches a lot like us too, so I'm sure this is funny for her too.
Yeah, someone in the chat said, "How do you even shave a chimp without them killing you or beating you up or something?"
Very carefully, apparently. That's what they said.
But anyways, you got to imagine too. This is not a good habitat or environment. Even if you had a chimp as a pet, there's no way that someone could buy multiple chimps and bring them into a police station without not one person knowing what they were doing ahead of time. But anyways, we found other articles. I guess we're keeping them private for now because they kind of give away certain things that we don't want to give out at this point in time.
Yeah.
The possible crash sites. This is the topic that everyone wants to fight and argue about, so we're getting... right, Nick? Is Nick on the line, too?
He's MIA.
Oh, well, Brent, you could say, Brent.
What's that there? Sorry, I was walking in the house. What's that? Like 30 degrees out.
I said the topic of the crash site is where everyone wants to fight and argue over the material.
Yeah.
All right, well, possible crash sites. There's two popular ones, which I named earlier. There's Copper Flats, which is where that mining operation is going, which is the security guard I told you said that he's seen it crash in the mine or seen it fly over him. That's up to debate, depending on what you want to take from it. And there's Kimberly Mountain overlooking Highway 50 in Copper Flats is the other one, which is close to where the radar tower was I was telling you about earlier for Project High Ray. Through my own research, though, it seems that there's kind of a trend. The original reports say the crash site's located on a nearby mountain called Ward Mountain. And I have some stories of some Boy Scouts that were up on Ward Mountain and claimed that they had seen the crash site a few weeks after the military had left, I guess, is what that story was. But in the 1970s to the 1990s, the crash site moved to the Copper Flats area. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I thought that was interesting to note. But
yeah, I must add too. Actually, being there in person, it's very, very likely something could crash there and never be even. It could be very hidden. So it would make for perfect.
What I was going to say earlier was, can you and Nick elaborate a little bit on what the scenery looks like, or could you keep something like that a secret up there?
Oh, definitely. The biggest thing about the area is surrounded by pine woods, like light brushery, desert, half desert, half mountain. It's so easy to hide something up there, it's beyond belief. But so if something crashed, it would take a while to get to it too. Especially in rural Nevada in like the 50s like this, it would be definitely a place for something like that to take place.
Well,
and Nick, hold on, Jack. I got to go back outside because Nick's phone died, so he's kind of sharing mine off and on.
Oh, that's fine. Well,
we're trying to manage this here.
Well, when Nick gets on, I have a question for him.
Okay, here we go. All right, Nick. Jeremy has a question for you. Here's Nick now.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Nick, can you describe a little bit the area from the 1950s to now? What has changed, if anything, and could you keep something like that a secret up in that area?
In Ely. Well, Ely hasn't probably changed in the past 200 years, never mind the past 50 years. Seriously, Northern Nevada is... No, they got a McDonald's. They got a McDonald's. That's probably been the small change, maybe a couple other fast food restaurants. But McDonald's, yeah. Ely, on the other hand, is in rural Nevada, and anywhere where you go to a rural area, it's very slow to change and very slow to grow, especially because there's so little people out there. I mean, the town of Ruth might be about 50 people. It's small town USA at its finest. So it would be very easy to keep a secret up there because it's small town USA, and because there was even less people back there in the 50s than there is now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's booming compared to the 1950s. But
well, I was telling the audience, Ely has 6,000 people, and that makes it the second biggest town north of Tonopah, which is in central Nevada.
Ely or Ruth?
Ely.
Oh, yeah, I think that Ruth has 6,000. I'm like, where were the other... Where were the other 5,500 people that were supposed to be there? Yeah, Ely might have 6,000. Yeah, Ruth has nobody there.
As I covered earlier, basically these Ripetown, Kimberly, Ruth, Ely. At this point in time, they were all four of them were run by this company. At this time, it was called Kennecott Mining. Kennecott Mining, and the Nevada Consolidated Copper Company. They basically ran these towns. When the police couldn't get there, the mine security was like the police. The medical staff at the mine, if someone got hurt in one of these towns of Kimberly or Ruth or any of those, if you couldn't make it to the hospital, the medical staff for the mine, they would come see you at your house or wherever. I mean, if this really did crash in this copper pit, this is the right place to do it. I mean, these people are already secretive as it is. I mean, you figure if the government comes in and tells these people not to talk, there's no way this is getting out. But Nick, anyways, I guess Nick's gone.
I'm here. Tim had the phone. What was it, Jer?
Can you describe the copper mine, how it kind of entrenches the area? It's kind of like a natural wall, keeping outsiders up.
The copper mine is pretty much everything out there, and it's very secluded. It's, like I said, a small town America at its finest, and the people there have been there for generations, and anytime someone who's from outside the area comes there, they get very suspicious of them, so therefore they keep secrets from them, and they build up. It's kind of like police. You know, there's this thing called the thin blue line with police culture, and that's the police kind of see themselves as going against everybody else, and that's how the people in Ruth and Ely think. They think that it's them versus the world. So when we as paranormal investigators go there, they build up this wall of resistance to us because they think we're outsiders and they don't think we should be there.
Well, yeah, the other thing I'd like to mention is I think that I am the first investigator that they've taken serious for the most part in years. Yes, there's been the occasional person that's collected the occasional stories, but as far as someone going to the town, staying with these people, building relationships with these people, I think we are the only ones in at least since the 70s that I know of.
Yeah, like I said, even then you've met a lot of resistance at first, though.
Well, still do actually. Well, I had an article published in the Ely Daily Times newspaper last week. I don't know if any of you listeners want to check that out. I actually was quoted in there for my upcoming trip to Ely in 2 weeks. And I'm in the midst of...
Okay, Nick wants to say something to you, Jerry.
All right.
I was just going to say one more thing about that whole outsiders versus the townspeople type of thing. The fact that you've been getting a flood of phone calls since the journalist put you in the paper is consistent with human psychology and how people act within their social groups. You've been validated by somebody inside the Ely community. Therefore, since you've gotten validation, everyone else will now begin to validate you and trust you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Jeremy, we also wanted to mention that when you were talking about the actual mine itself earlier, like the modern-day mine, remember you didn't mention how it was under, extremely heavy, guard and security?
Oh, yeah, that's the thing. I told him that it was under high security, but when you actually go to this mine, the security is so high that it almost looks like you're entering a military base when you're coming from the town of Ruth, because we tried driving as far as we could go without having to answer to security, and it literally looked like we're entering a military base. It's weird.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Anyways, back to these crash sites. So there's the two main ones that you hear about on the internet. The one that's overlooking Highway 50 on the side of Kimberly Mountain, we have talked to people who claim that it's there. That's where it happened, but we're going out there to actually walk around in a couple weeks. But the site that I think is about 75-80% of where it's at is not actually either one of those, but it's a little farther away, and I say this in quotes, has lots of undeniable, definite signs of what we're looking for. When I say that, I say multiple eyewitnesses who don't know each other took us to this spot or told us about this spot without knowing that the others even existed. And this includes first-hand witnesses, which are people that are now in their 80s and 90s. They told us about this, and it brought us up there. So this is pretty good stuff right here. I'm not saying that the eyewitnesses who say it crashed in the copper mine are wrong, because parts of their stories do match up to this location. For instance, the security guard, just say it didn't crash in the mine. From his point of view, he could have seen this craft fly over him and crash on this other area, because this other area is at a great viewpoint. And then I told you earlier, from the town of East Ely. What's that? Anyways, from the town of East Ely, you could also see the UFO crash in that spot from there. And we also had reports from a town called McGill, where they seen it crash. Ely, like I said, even some people from the town of Eureka, which is to the far west, they all seen it crash. So you put all this into perspective, it gives you a general area where this could have happened. But
have there been any stories of more than one crash, or has it always just been there's one crash and one crash site?
Oh, there's at least 2 UFO crashes, but I'm getting there. We'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Beck, you like I said, as soon as we filmed this, way back in the day, we knew you'd be the second most interested one. So.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this story before until I read the article that you guys posted.
But here's the good thing, though. Well,
Jeremy's been doing his work for 5 years.
I'm the only one that's really done this much research on it. I find it kind of amazing, actually.
Yeah, Jeremy and Nick deserve the credit, primarily Jeremy, but yeah, they definitely have done their homework.
I have to eat, sleep, and breathe Ely to find this much out. I told you, George Knapp, he was a TV personality, and he's on the Coast to Coast AM radio show, which comes on every night. They wouldn't even tell him any of this stuff, and I was not to mention me. I don't know if it's because he's more like the Zach Baggins, Ghost Hunters Taps type of person versus me. Well, anyways, so there may be 2 crash sites. this is my other theory. So it's one of the three theories. It's either probably the one spot I told you about, but there's another spot where I think the UFO hit the mountain and kept going for a short time before it settled down and stopped at a second site. This makes sense because you figure the velocity and inertia of this UFO coming through the atmosphere, flying around as fast as they're reported, it wouldn't just hit one spot and stop unless it crashed straight down. This, you got to imagine, is flying, horizontally. You on the line, Tim or Nick? Like, what do you think, Brent? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah.
You mean that it was flying horizontally?
No, that there might be two crash sites because if it's going as fast as UFOs go and it's flying horizontally versus straight down, it would have hit probably something and kept going.
Oh yeah. That sounds.
But when I asked, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say when I asked, I actually meant, do you think could have been more than one UFO, two crash sites, two UFOs, or however many? I don't know, but that's what I was actually asking about. Is there more than one UFO involved?
Oh yeah, well there is more than one UFO, but that's years later. I'll get there in a minute.
Okay, I keep jumping ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's all right. We did the same thing.
It's okay. When I do this all the time, but what I was saying was, Brent, if you think about it, if a UFO crashed this up the crater straight down in the ground, like what most people think, it would have to be going straight down. Because if it's even an airplane crash, when they crash, they skid around the ground for a while before they smash into the ground, unless they're dive bombing and I don't know what you call it, like head-on collision type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was saying was the Roswell UFO crash, they actually had two UFO impact zones too, one where it hit and kept going and one where it actually settled down. The Roswell site that most people think of, that one is actually where it hit the ground and kept going. Because the alien bodies were actually found farther away at a second crash site.
Yeah.
Most people get the two confused.
Art Campbell helped us out with
we
that
talked
too.
to Art Campbell, and he was the one that found the second crash site. What else? Well, Kecksburg, I don't know if you guys know about that, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, that UFO crash had one where it went straight down and just smashed into the ground and stayed there. Well, we are going to go on a quick commercial break, and when we get back, I'm going to talk more about the Ely UFO crash, and you're listening to BFP Radio.
I love Basso, it's rich in chocolate tea. Chocolate flavored Basso is mighty good for me. Mama puts it in my milk for extra energy. Basso gives me iron and sunshine vitamin D. Oh, I love Basso, that's the drink for me.
Up from the depths, 30 stories high, breathing fire, his man in the sky. Godzilla, and Godzilla.
I know Cool, and Cool's teaming up with a good balanced breakfast.
Teaming up with Mr. T Stereo, that's getting on the team that knows how cool breakfast can be. You get a crispy corn taste with a touch of brown sugar. Teaming up with Mr. T.
It's Cool.
Teaming up with Mr. T, golden sweet crispy teas. One bite and you're gonna be eating with the team that's teaming up with Mr. T.
It's Cool.
Teaming up with Mr. T.
And we're back from a quick commercial break. Couple of retro commercials there. Well,
teaming up with Mr. T.
Well, we're talking a little bit about the Ely UFO crash over the last hour and a half or so. Sorry, I've been going pretty quick here trying to cover all the material, but anyways, I'd like to get to my next topic, which is the government cover-up of this event. Well, before we get started, I'd like to list a few good government cover-ups. Of course, you think of the weather balloon story with Roswell when you think of UFO crash cover-ups, because...
Swamp gas is my favorite. Swamp gas is my favorite, though.
Yeah. Well, Roswell was covered up, or at least they attempted to. It didn't really work. And then there's Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, I mentioned earlier. They said that it was a satellite that had crashed to Earth at that UFO crash. There was 2 atomic bombs dropped in secret during World War II. Our friend Stanton Friedman told us on a couple of interviews we had with him on the show. So you figure if they could cover up dropping 2 atomic bombs in secret, that they could cover up pretty much anything. At least they think they can. This is no different. You see, first, I guess, from what I hear, they tried censoring the media since, I guess, like I said, there's no exact article stating what had happened. Well, the most intriguing and possible UFO cover-up involves a military bomber airplane that crashed in northern Nevada, allegedly killing about 13 or 14 military people. And if you notice, the listing, like I said 16 alien bodies were reportedly recovered. This airplane is only 2 off. Well, I spoke with eyewitnesses and locals who lived in the area at the time or were in the military and have seen this whole event take place. Well, to set the scene for you, okay, this military airplane, apparently, as it said, a UFO airplane crashed on top of this mountain, and it's called Humboldt Peak. Well, Humboldt Peak is sparsely populated. There's not really any towns nearby, and local ranchers had to direct the military with the best routes to get up the mountain, and the ranchers had to go with the military to help carry these bodies of these pilots down. Sounds kind of sketchy, but it sounds like it could work. Well, not exactly. Looking at the military records and their course, I would call it their mission logs, whatever you want to call them, it took 2 days to start searching for this crashed airplane. So, just that right there is kind of odd. You got to tell me it takes 2 days to look for a crashing airplane, a crashed military airplane? Because you know it didn't make it to its destination. You know that people's lives are at stake. Why would they take 2 days to even start looking? Well, I don't know. What do you think, Brent?
I don't know. Maybe back in the day it was a little bit harder to get a hold of some stuff. I don't know. It's the military.
Well, the way you have to look at it, too, is if they were tracking this plane's whereabouts, they would know about where it crashed in the first place. So why would it take 2 days?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay,
they would
wait.
have to put a tracker on it, I would think.
Wait, time out. Okay. There were crashes of UFOs in Roswell and other locations in the 1940s and 1950s, and the U.S. military were on those faster than you could blink. Do you really think it would take them 2 days to find a crashed airplane that they knew of, never mind an unidentified flying object?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, even in Europe during World War II, if airplanes would go off on a mission over in Europe, like say a bombing mission, if those bombers got shot down, they would know instantly, okay, they're right there, that's where they're at, because they were tracking these airplanes, and they had, sorry, I'm kind of unfamiliar. Tim, don't they have like a different people on the bombers? I'm trying to think what they had, like a, I can't believe I'm going blank on this right now.
Like radiomen that keep track?
Besides the pilot, can you name like some of the other people that are on the crew of a bomber in World War II?
Yeah, the bombardiers, the flight attendants, all sorts of different, all the different ranks,
like
and they also have engineers and everything too.
Yeah, they had the people that are supposed to get the pass. What are they called?
They have what? Yeah, they have like a radio, and there's also usually supposed to be like the tracker or like the guide.
Yeah. Well, anyways, the other thing I'd like to mention, okay, an airplane crashed, and they waited 2 days to pick up this wreckage. If a military or a civilian airplane, as some of the people said, crashed outside of Ely, the military was there within 2 or 3 hours to block off the roads and all that, to keep people from getting in and out of that copper mine area and all that. You got to tell me that a military airplane would have less preference than a civilian one? And that was a light airplane. That wasn't something carrying whatever they had on board of the airplane at that time.
Well, like I said, not just that. I'm sure the military had guidelines set up after Roswell, like how to clean things up better and everything, so that's probably why they had a quick reaction time.
Well, judging by the quick reaction time, sorry, it's a little off topic, there was a UFO crash in Needles, California, which is about an hour from here, and they said the UFO crashed, the military was there within 9 minutes. This thing was still on fire, and they hooked it up to a crane helicopter guarded by 3 Apaches or something, whatever they are, attack helicopters, and they flew away with this thing. It was still on fire. That's how much they got this down to a T nowadays.
Yeah, the Chinook.
Was that the one from a few years ago, the Needles one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Chinook helicopters.
With Boathouse Bob or whatever.
Well, I'm not saying that...
We live out here in UFO Crash Central, so we know all that kind of crap.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm getting into a couple of interesting stories here. Tim, you're going to want to put Nick on the line for this one.
All right, Nick, prepare to go online.
All right, well...
All right. Well, Nicky Boy's smoking a cigarette. Hold on.
All right, well, I'll say my other story first. Well, personally, this has to take nerves of steel to do this. I actually called 3 military bases asking about these UFO crashes. I'm not saying, I didn't expect much of an answer or some big confession saying, oh, yeah, it crashed, this is what happened. But I did get some interesting responses. Mind you, I don't recommend doing this because the government will probably track you and they will probably keep tabs on you once they know you're doing this. So I called these military bases. Nellis Air Force Base, which is the one in Las Vegas, they didn't answer to my request, email, or telephone. Neither did the one Edwards Air Force Base, and ironically, Brent used to work at Edwards Air Force Base. But anyways, I did call Hill Air Force Base in western Utah, and a base historian, I don't remember the guy's name, but he actually did get on the line and talk to me. He told me, well, I guess I got to stay out of the conversation. So he asked me, he goes, okay, so what are you looking for? And I said, well, I'm doing a project on some strange crashes in Nevada. And he goes, oh, well, this is Utah. I said, oh, no, well, so-and-so, this guy or that guy over in Ely told me to call this base. And then he's like, okay, well, almost as if he knew what I was going to talk about. So I said, okay, well, I'm looking to talk to you about a strange crash. Well, what's your strange crash? And I said, well, it's near Ely. And he goes, oh, well, those types of crashes are classified, is what the guy said. And I said, oh, well, I didn't even say it was a UFO crash because I know. But it's classified, is what he said. And then you have to remember, he didn't deny that this happened. He didn't tell me quit looking or this didn't happen. He told me it's classified as if it happened, but he just can't tell me about it. And what do you think of that, Brent?
What do I think about what?
What do you think of that story I just said?
I don't know.
Well, I know that the historian in Utah was probably trying to tell you the truth, but not telling you the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was giving you the facts, but he had to say it in such a way and word it in such a way that he wouldn't get in trouble over it.
Well, it gets weirder. Then after he told me that, the guy abruptly gets off the phone, and I was asked at least 4 or 5 times to go down to the military base and have a talk with an unnamed individual about the military records from that point in time. I declined it because I don't feel like getting interrogated here and waterboarded, so I declined.
My favorite's waterboarded.
That's what I said. I didn't feel like getting waterboarded that day, so I didn't go down there. But anyways, before the guy got off the phone, he told me the procedure. He told me the procedure on what would have happened if the military were to pick up the UFOs. This is what he told me. He said Nellis Air Force Base would have been the first ones onto the scene. But then he said that at the time, Hill Air Force Base was a supply depot, like they were sending packages in and out to different military bases. So what the guy basically told me, he not in these exact words, but this is basically what he told me. He said Nellis Air Force Base would have picked up the wreckage, and they would have picked up the alien bodies. And after Hill Air Force Base personnel got there, they would have flown it from wherever Hill Air Force Base felt like sending it. And Area 51 was in its infancy at this time, so I don't think it was Area 51. People say Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which I guess could be true, could not be. I don't know.
Well, I'm thinking that's the most likely, because that's where most things were prized.
Well, I was saying, I don't know for sure. That's probably it, but it wasn't Area 51, I don't think. Because Area 51 wasn't like it is now.
Yeah.
Well, when Nick's ready, I have something I need him to talk with me on here about.
What do you call it, Jer? Now that you bring up Area 51, let me quickly kind of put a little footnote here. In my own notes,
I'm going to step away for a second, Nick, for about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to step away from the line for a minute or two real quick.
Okay. Well, I guess I could go ramble on for a little bit about some of the side notes I have. Well, in Area 51 is not abandoned. It's still quite functional and operational. Jeremy, Tim, and Brent went to Tikaboo Peak and were overlooking the base and saw people down there doing whatever. There's the first fact. Second fact, a couple of years ago there was a special on ABC where this guy went up to Tikaboo Peak as well, and he was videotaping workers being flown in and out of Area 51 on the Red Stripe airplanes. Down at McCarran Airport, there's giant white planes with a red stripe down the side. They stand out like a sore thumb, which... And there's some at Rancho Airport as well.
Aren't they called like Jenning or Janning or something with a J type of airplane?
Jenning.
The names of them.
Jenning, I believe Tim says, but...
Becky knows his stuff.
But,
I've seen those specials he's talking about.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about 2010.
Yeah.
2010, 2009-ish. And then last year, in November of last year, a TV news crew from the British Broadcasting Corporation went down to Area 51, and apparently they trespassed onto the base property, and they were promptly arrested. They were promptly arrested by the United States federal government. Why would you arrest somebody for trespassing on something where nothing is going on?
Yeah.
That's a straight rhetorical question. The answer is there is stuff going on there. There's plenty of documentary evidence. There's a dog barking in the background, but I apologize for that. But yes, there's plenty of documentary evidence to prove that Area 51 is still fully functional and operational. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the United States government even denied the existence of this base. Up until the early 2000s. Didn't want to stick that in there. And then, now that we've, as a people, have found that this base is in existence, now they claim that it's been abandoned and that it's no longer in use. Well, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. I wonder what the next half-cooked excuse the government will have.
Well, the quick thing I was going to mention is me and Nick have a really good friend who says that his uncle worked for Area 51 in the last 10 years or so. But, yeah, Nick, are you on the line, Nick?
Yeah, there's some dogs barking in the background. What are you saying?
I have a story. I'm going to tell my side of the story, and then I want Nick to say it from his perspective. we were interviewing witnesses for this UFO case that we've been talking about, this Ely UFO crash, and there was one undeniable fact that the men in black are on this case, still were and will be for a long time. There's 3 or 4 different instances I'd like to mention. The first one, me and Nick were calling witnesses on the phone instead of phone interviews for in-person. And we called this individual. He went berserk. He went into hysterics. Here's how the phone call went. He answered the phone, and I said, "Hi, I'm Jeremy Meador. I'm working on a story, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "Oh, okay. What kind of story?" I go, "It's on UFOs." And he goes, "Oh, okay, I'll talk about UFOs. What about them?" And then I said, "Well, so-and-so mentioned that you were part of this military group that helped pick up this UFO." He immediately, almost immediately went into hysterics. He said, they told me not to talk about it. I have to go right now, and just hung up on us real fast. Nick, anything you want to add on to it, Nick? Because I know I made it a little bit shorter than...
Well, when we called him and asked him about the UFO crash, his tone of voice changed. I'll try to do my own rendition of things as I usually do, my sound effects and people impressions. But when we called him, he said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And I said, "Hi, would you like to tell us about the Ely UFO crash?" He goes, "They told me not to do it anymore." And he clicked, and he hung up on us faster than you could count to 3. So this man was fearing for his life even talking about the case or even hearing about it. And a thing to think about is a few years ago, he appeared on a news broadcast with Ed Pierce, who did a small investigative piece on the case that Jeremy's doing right now in Ely. So he talked about it then, but he wouldn't talk about it about 2 years ago when we interviewed him.
Well, his story changed, it seemed, once I told him, "Hey, look, I know you know more than what you said on this TV show because so-and-so told me to talk to you," and that's when he freaked out.
Oh, yeah, but my question is, why would he have such a change of attitude from the news broadcast, I believe, which was in 2006, to the year of 2010? What would be his big change in his attitude? And as you mentioned before, perhaps the Men in Black or some other government agency tracked him down after he did that broadcast.
Well, he did mention they. He said, "They told me not to talk about it." And I was sitting there, I go, who is they?
And Nick, can you please repeat that plinking sound from 3 months ago, please?
Anyways.
Thank you.
Anyways, there's 2 other stories I'd like to bring up with Nick on the line. Well, that's a strange story and all. You could go either way. You could say, oh, maybe the guy's just being an idiot. Who knows? Well, I set up an interview with me and Nick and Kim. We're supposed to go up and interview this woman up in Ruth, probably, I'd say, 2 years ago. I know I've said this story on a radio show before, but anyways, I'll say it again. Well, this woman, we go, okay, well, next Thursday or next Friday, we'll be up there to talk to you. And she goes, okay, we set up an interview, and about Monday or Tuesday rolls around, she calls me on my phone and says, thanks for doing your interview. I'd like to say thank you, and starts talking about what happened at this interview. And I said, wait a minute. We're in Las Vegas. We're not up there right now. Who did you talk to? And she said, oh, well, Nick and Jeremy just left. They got into a blacked out SUV and drove off. And I was like, well, that wasn't us. Then who was it? You know? And how did they know we were coming and how did they know who that? That's just something was really bizarre about the whole incident.
So they claim to be you guys?
Yeah, I don't know who it was. Somebody said they were Nick, and somebody said that they were Jeremy, and they came to this woman's house. What's that?
Yeah, that's like I wasn't even involved. My name wasn't even issued, but I think that's terrifying. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, that's pretty creepy that someone
claims
to be.
Wow.
But somebody, I think the only thing I could say was maybe they found out I was doing the case when I called those military bases or something. I don't know. Anyways, something I'd like to mention. Nick, can you talk a little bit about the Freedom of Tim or whoever's on the line? Can you talk about the Freedom of Information Act?
Well, back in the 1990s, under the Clinton administration, I believe, there was a law passed called Bush signed it into law, actually. It was the Bush administration. No, George W. Bush signed the Freedom of Information Act, I believe. And basically the law says that United States citizenry has the right to know what's going on in the government as long as it's not classified. And obviously the government is very difficult in trying to deal with when you want to get information from them, but the law states that you can write the government to ask about their dealings.
May I interject? Didn't the British government just like a couple of years ago announce that they confirmed that UFOs exist?
Yeah, they did. And that was our friend Robert, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, they said it exists when they came out with Project Blue Book in the 90s, but they never fully said, talked about it after that, beyond that.
Yeah, but basically the Freedom of Information Act states that United States citizens can write the government and demand transparency of them and know of unclassified dealings. It's basically...
Well, the other thing I was going to say about that, Nick, while you're talking about it, Stanton Friedman told me that under that law, people that were sworn to secrecy, like random civilians, by the government, under that law, supposedly that they could talk about UFOs like their incidents. If that's the case, why can't more people come forward, or why aren't they?
They're afraid.
Well,
a lot of them are afraid.
First, there's two things. First, there's the fact that the people are probably afraid of retaliation from the government. And secondly, there's something that I've learned very well from going to school and learning law, and I believe you've probably learned this, Jeremy. There's a difference between what the law ought to be and what actually happens. The government seldom follows its own laws and written statutes, so even though these people are protected from the law, or by the law, the government will still intimidate these people and even in some cases go out and illegally arrest these people who talk about UFOs. Or perhaps kill them.
Well, the story that stands out to me when you hear this is Art Bell, the old radio show announcer of Coast to Coast AM. He was talking about UFOs one day, and the generator shut off, like the power shut off to his building. And he had a backup generator. This backup generator kicks on, and he keeps broadcasting. It cuts out again. He keeps broadcasting a third time. Well, anyways, so all of a sudden Art Bell abruptly gets cut off the air, and he's found 2 weeks later on the side of the road, stripped naked on, Highway 60 or whatever it is that comes from Vegas to Pahrump. He's found stripped naked on the side of the road, and he claims that he was brought to a military base, beaten and interrogated for days. Right, Nick?
Art Bell was treated very harshly by the government for his espousing various secrets and things that the government has done. So the bottom line is the government does not like questioning. The government does not like people who go against it in any way, shape, or form. They don't like any challenge. So if you do, better be prepared for a very strong resistance from the government.
Well, on that note, I'm going to go into skeptics and criticisms of my work and the UFO crash. Well, I was told by a colleague of mine, once I told him about these strange rocks I told you about earlier, not to investigate by color, in quotations, referring to those rock samples I collected, and to leave my house like he does to conduct a proper investigation. All right. I have to go off on this. First off, I never said the rock samples are 100% UFO crash related. They're interesting, and they might be, but I never said that they are. Even the person that gave the one rock to us, she said it might not be. Second, I do leave my house regularly and travel all the time talking to different individuals and searching for more information. I think 5 years of microfilm research at different universities and multiple trips around the city and state, and the list goes on and on, that doesn't count as leaving my house? I mean, that's just ridiculous if you ask me. Anyway, so you can tell it sets me off, especially coming from one of my colleagues and someone that I looked up to for a few years. So that really pissed me off. Anyways, I'll talk and listen to just about anybody who has a story about the incident, whether it's first-hand, second-hand, third-hand, whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that the story is not true because it's farther from the source, but first-hand stories do carry more weight than like second or third-hand. I'm not going to say that. You know what I mean. If an investigator conducting research on a 60-year-old UFO crash does not care to listen to second or third-hand witnesses, you'd have to be a fool. Because you figure, how many first-hand witnesses are really out there 60 years ago? I mean, they're going to be in their 80s or 90s. And I wrote, yes, I have found first-hand witnesses for those of you who are listening that are going to get on me about that. And then the other thing that I frequently hear is, what if the military airplane crash is exactly what it sounds like? A real military airplane crashed on an isolated peak. And I wrote, well, then the plane crash does have a very strange cleanup procedure, doesn't it? Right? At the very least, if it's a regular UFO or airplane crash, it has to have it's a strange cleanup effort. Well, Becky talked about this earlier. She mentioned it to me. Are there 2 UFO crashes in the area? This is supposed to be my big moment at the end of the show here. Well, there are
give it away. Here's the drum roll.
Wait, I'm finding. What's that?
It was a drum roll.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Oh, anyways, now that my big moment's coming, there are 2 UFO crashes in the area. Throughout my research on the Ely UFO crash case, it's come to my attention that a second crash did happen, but it's a little bit north of the Ely one, and it's closer to Elko. I was sent drawings and heard multiple eyewitness stories from ex-military men who said that, yes, there was a second UFO crash. And the original investigator even told me, yes, there is a second crash. This one's not even anywhere online at the moment, nowhere. I have not released any details yet besides what I just said. I'm keeping that to myself until my new website comes out, eyufocrash.com, and I'm making a second one called elkoufocrash.com. My whole idea of making these websites is so that people have somewhere to come if they're going to talk about these UFO crashes. Like I said, I've been all over the media. I have reasonable, I guess, besides me, I don't know who else would really compete with me to say, why don't put that website up? But anyways, on that note, I'll say, Nick, you said you had a couple of facts you wanted to state real quick that you wrote down?
Yeah, well, Nevada is the second highest reported state for UFO sightings, and Las Vegas is the 4th highest city in the country. And according to this one website, which I believe were based on MUFON statistics, MUFON statistics, it said that there have been 104 reported UFO sightings from the city of Las Vegas since the year of 2000. Now, if you figure out 104 sightings divided by 13 years, that's equivalent to about 8 sightings a year.
Well, that's the ones that are reported too, though.
Well, no, there's 2 things I was going to get to. One, I heavily dispute those statistics because, like crime, UFO sightings and paranormal sightings in general are underreported or unreported. So people see things, and out of fear of embarrassment or lazy or whatever, for a multitude of different reasons, they do not report their sighting, first off. Secondly, when they report these sightings to MUFON combs, I'm trying to think of the word, they comb through these sightings with a very, very fine comb. They pick it apart like a scientist would dissect a frog, And if they find that your sighting is unsatisfactory in some way, it doesn't meet their standards, then they throw it in the garbage bin. So after you take those two facts into consideration, that most people don't report their sightings, and that the sightings that are reported to MUFON, and MUFON then takes those sightings and discards probably 99% of them. So that's why you get the absurd number of 8 sightings a year.
Well, Nick, I don't want to interrupt you, but someone's asking for you to elaborate on why does Ely have more UFO sightings or less, judging by the area and the city?
Well, from my own research, I don't know if I could speak for anybody else, but from my own research, from the year of 1950 till probably about 2-3 years ago, there was the occasional UFO sighting, but it wasn't something that was heavily documented. But about 2006 or 2007, there began a rash of UFO sightings in the area, and that's why Ed Pierce decided to make I call it the infamous YouTube video about the Ely crash that we're talking about today.
Nick.
Yes.
It was a UFO crash.
Yes, a UFO crash. And yes, there was a rash of sightings from about 2006, 2007 to the present. So as of right now, there is a great deal of UFO sightings in the area, probably more than the average part of the country. Now, I could get into various different things as to why it is this, but that would probably be a show in and of itself. So to answer the guy's question, Ely, as of this moment, has more UFO sightings than the rest of the state, I would say. And I'll toss one reason out there. One reason is simply it's in the middle of nowhere where you can see the stars a lot better, and UFOs are a big part of the cultural history of the area. So, yeah, and there's military in the area as well.
Well, Area 51's close by too, though.
Oh yeah, out on the U.S. Route 315 or 351. I'm not exactly sure of the numerical.
Extraterrestrial highway.
Yeah, extraterrestrial highway. So you got all that activity going on in the area, which could also lead to an increase in UFO sightings. So that, like I said, basically, Ely has a greater number of UFO sightings than the average place in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick, was that still a UFO crash?
Yes, it was a UFO crash.
Well, Nick, now that you're on the line, I went over this earlier, but I haven't gone over it with you. Can you explain to me, I got a lot of backlash from this from our listeners at least, can you explain to me how I mentioned that there is a site that we're looking at. It's not the 2 famous crash sites. It's a third one that's looking like that's it, you know?
Yeah.
Can you explain to our listeners how parts of the security guard story and Claude's story, how they are right but wrong at the same time, if that's the crash site?
Okay. Well, the popular theory floating around on the internet and amongst many locals of the Ely area is that the crash occurred within or very close to the copper mines. And Pete, the security guard, who said that he saw the crash, there's some problems with it. First, that piece of information is a filtered piece of information. The communication or the information that has been given to us comes from a third-hand witness who said they got it from a friend. So we really don't know exactly what has been said by the original witness. If you've ever played a game of telephone, you would know that within even 2 or 3 people that a message could be drastically changed is one problem. Secondly, when Claude House, who said he saw the crash, he didn't really say that it crashed into the copper mines specifically. So his story is a little at variance with the security guard story, which we can't prove whether one story is right or wrong, but there's definitely some suspicion that's cast upon both stories, in my opinion, because they're at variance with each other. Whenever you're looking at eyewitness evidence, you need to find corroborating eyewitness testimony, not contradicting testimony. When we have mildly contradicting testimony like we do from the Claude House and the security guard story, we have to have some concern.
Well, Nick, not just that, but can you also mention you think of the site that we're going to in 2 weeks, that's probably it, right?
Yeah.
Can you mention how Claude House, the security guard story, and the other first-hand witnesses and second-hand witnesses talked to, can you describe how their stories all match up and lead to that one spot?
Oh, well, Claude House and the security guard said that they saw the UFO fly over the copper pit. They never said that it crashed into the copper pit. Well, at least with the filtered story about the security guard, we can infer that it flew over the copper pit. The various parts about explosions and other dramatic elements we probably should hold some caution about, but what you can draw from both of those stories is that the UFO did go over the copper mine. And with the third site that we are going to see, you can infer then that the UFO flew over the copper mine and crashed into this site, because this gentleman was a first-hand witness who we are keeping anonymous until a later date, said that the UFO, he saw the UFO crash into this area. This is the words from his own lips. And that corroborates with the other two stories, because Claude House and Pete the security guard said they saw the UFO fly overhead.
In that direction.
This guy, in that direction, yeah. In the direction of this third crash site, while this gentleman who gave us, this first-hand witness who gave us this information about the crash, explicitly says that he saw the UFO crash into this location that we're going to in a week or two.
Well, the other thing that I was wondering, it's very spooky, don't you, Nick? Say this radar dish at one point on top of the mountain. I told you it's not there anymore. They just have those small military things on top of the mountain. But anyways, back in the heyday, Project High Range had a radar dish the size of a house, like a regular person's house on top of this mountain, overlooking Ely. Even nowadays, Nick, you got to admit, that sort of has a cynical, like almost spooky appearance to it when you're in the town of Ely. That's always, no matter where you look, if you're looking, like you could see that tower overlooking the town.
Aesthetically, it is something that's very creepy to you if you are to look in the direction of Kimberly Mountain and see the satellite apparatuses on top of the peak. And to think that the government had placed a watch station on top of the mountain after the crash in 52, it's almost like Big Brother is watching you himself. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. It's imposing, and you think that in the country like America, where we have the freedom of privacy, or supposedly the Fourth Amendment freedom of privacy, that we won't have that type of thing, but we do. And even though the satellite is gone, when you look at the mountain, there still is some various different types of apparatuses on top of the mountain, so you are reminded of the legacy of the watch station or the radar station that was on top of the mountain to keep track of the UFOs and whatever else they may have been keeping track of. So it is imposing to think that there's this Big Brother is kind of looking down at you and watching and tracking all your movements.
But the other thing, though, Nick, I know you weren't on the line earlier, and we only have a few minutes left, and we have about 5 minutes left. I was going to say, in the last few minutes of the show, can you talk about the... Sorry, I got sidetracked in the chat. Can you talk about the drive up to that radar base and why you shouldn't go up there? And while you're talking about that, can you elaborate a little bit on the military buildings that are up there? I mentioned that you could hear the hum of electronics and things, but can you talk a little bit about the drive up there and why you shouldn't go up there?
All right. Well, the drive up Kimberly Mountain is very perilous and dangerous. I wouldn't advise too many people to try it, even though we got up there in a 2011 Chevy Malibu. I question our own sanity for doing that, but the road going up the mountain is extremely narrow, and it is filled with there's a great amount of debris from the military, and there's a lot of sharp rocks, loose sand and gravel,
and shredded metal.
Shredded metal. Yeah, there's things up there that it just spells doom. If you go up there, you could pop a tire, you could drive off the side of the mountain, there's 1,000 different things that can go wrong. It's like that one Spike TV channel which says, 1,000 different ways you can die. It's probably all taken from that mountain that drives. So I wouldn't advise anybody to go up there, especially in adverse weather conditions.
We went right before it was up.
Yeah, we went up. Actually, our team, or me, Jeremy, and Tim, went up the mountain very short, actually a day right before it snowed. We wouldn't have gone up if it had snowed. That would have been suicide because it was tough without snow.
Yeah, actually, no, it was that night we came back.
Actually, it was a very a quick fact check on myself. It was snowing that very same night that we got back into town. So we literally
21,000.
We got by the hair of our knuckles when we were climbing the mountain. The conditions, like I said, just to summarize it, are very perilous. Oh, yeah, there's also 40, 50 mile an hour wind gusts towards the top of the summit. So
I was telling Becky also that once you get up there, it's unless you're like us and you're looking for something specific or just to say you were there, there's not really much to see there.
And not to mention the sign that says "Do not enter" or you will be shot.
Well, when you do get to the top, you find, like I said, various different types of towers and an abandoned radar station and so forth. Right now, according to one of the locals, the White Pine County Sheriff's Department uses some of the machines and computers on the top of that mountain to process phone calls and to record various other types of records. There is also, I believe, an 18-foot Verizon tower located on top of the mountain. However, there are some old, beat-up trailers from the 1950s or 60s, they're very old-looking, that still have the hump of machines and computers inside them. And they're locked. And, who knows what's going on.
Well, the other thing I forgot to mention earlier, you figure most of these buildings from the 1950s were taken off the mountain, and they were all moved out.
Running like code on it?
Well, you have to imagine what's inside these trailers or these buildings that they didn't take those ones off. They took off most of the other ones. But what's inside those ones, and what's going on that they have to keep those ones?
Well, if I could probably be tried for treason if I say this, but I guess I'm going to say this now. One of the doors was open to a trailer on top of the mountain, and I cracked. It was by pure chance. I didn't break any locks or anything. It was unlocked. It was cracked open. So I cracked it open a little bit, and I took a peek inside, and there was a computer screen which was it was a retro computer, from like the 1980s and DOS, running various different types of codes and whatnot by itself. So I don't know who or what used that tower. It could have been a government computer. It probably wasn't. I think it was the AT&T or sheriff's computer. But the fact that the computer system they had up there was probably 30 years old is very intriguing to me.
Well, Nick, we have about 30, 60 seconds left. I was going to say, sorry to end the show a little bit early, but if you can, everybody tune in to our next show Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be on the Orang Pendek, which is the dwarf Sasquatch. And if you're curious about sending me a sighting report or anything interesting regarding the Ely UFO crash, write me at bigfootspad@yahoo.com. And again, I'd like to thank everyone that contributed to the show today. And I'd like to thank you personally for calling in and everyone that listened. And I'll let my co-host say their goodbyes.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a good night. Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Night, everyone.
Right, tune in Saturday, everybody. Thank you.